for me, when I listen to like breakdowns of my favorite songs, like it's kind of like the golden goose thing. It's like let's kill the golden goose and see what makes it tick. So it's like let's ruin this thing by looking at the sum of its parts. I don't think that anything is the sum of its parts. So not to like presume that I've made any kind of golden goose or anything, but I just want to like put that out there where I think breakdowns are weird because it's like here's all this stuff to separately that all works together. So what I kind of want to do here a little bit more than just like go through everything that I put into this track is I want to talk a little bit about like the origins of it and why I made it and why I think it reflects me and my creative process. Because I think a traditional breakdown is just like, well, here's all the stuff that's in the track. And to me, that actually isn't ironically, like it isn't what makes it tick. What makes it tick is like the thing that you really wanted to express about like who you are and what you wanted to say. So I wanted I wanted to start at the very, very, very beginning of Cumulus. And I've got the chat open on my laptop, like right down here. So if anyone wants to jump in with questions, like that's what this is about. So Cumulus just came out Friday. And I looked at the creation date on this sketch and I made this in April 2024. I can talk more about the timeline later, but what I essentially did was, and I can kind of recreate the process here, was because if you look at, I was using my favorite synth, and a lot of times you'll see me open up this patch and it just says default, because a lot of times I just open up the default patch and just start tweaking, and I don't even save the patch. I just like save this, I came back later and saved it, but it was just messing with the default patch. And here's kind of what I did. So I probably was just like that day, I like to make sketches. Like I like to sort of be disciplined every at least like a couple times a week. It's really when I have time just to try to make something, just play and see what happens. So I probably opened up Ace, and I want to make sure, let me know if the volume is, I've tried to make the volume like weird so you can hear me talking over playing, but I probably did something like this where I was like, oh, okay, we got a saw wave sound. That's our default. And I was like, I want to make this a little bit more interesting, but I also want to keep it simple. So what I typically do is I'll patch the output of envelope 1 into the filters so that we're basically like deactivating the second envelope, turning this into a 1 oscillator, 1 envelope synth, doing like something like this to give it like a longer sound. And then usually doing something like this. So and then let's give it a little more brightness. This sounds kind of 80s and synthwavy, but it's pretty typical of like, thank you for letting me know the volume sounds good. Shrun trying. Okay. So, and I also want to, I like to caveat everything. So the caveat is like, I like this synth a lot. I think it's a great balance of flexibility and simplicity. It's also pretty cheap. It sounds good. I believe that like subtractive analog synths are all pretty much like 90% the same. So I don't think it matters what you use. This one, like I sort of vibe with this one. It's not the only synth I use, but generally if I'm just going to like mess around for 30 minutes, it's the one I open and experiment with. So I did something like this. I was like, this is kind of cool, but I want it to be a little more interesting. And I wanted to use noise. So instead of just like blending in noise like that, which just adds it to everything else, I was like, well, what if we could incorporate noise like a little differently and make it kind of more interesting? So I was like, what if we use noise to modulate the filter? So if we do that, it sounds like this. And it's kind of like mixed in there. But it's just like, it's sort of just like this fizzy texture. I was like, well, what if it was a little bit more dynamic than that? And what's so cool about Ace, and I promise this is not going to turn into the commercial for Ace, but what I really like about it is that it's truly modular. So a lot of modular synth plugins are not actually modular. They're just modular in terms of their modulation destinations, not their audio routing. What this allows you to do is actually like really route audio in a way that you would on like on an analog modular synth. So what's really cool is I can run like, so down here you get these mod, it says mod here, but these are like little VCA modules. So I can take noise, go into one of there, and I can modulate that with the output of the same envelope that I'm using to modulate the filter. And then I can take that and modulate the filter cutoff. So now it will only modulate the filter cutoff with noise for this envelope shape. So I get this kind of, we can start to dial it in here. You get this like kind of distressed like quality. And I was like, that's interesting. Okay, so now it sounds like it still has this like just sort of simple elemental like synth sound, but it's distressed. So I started playing with that. And what I started playing was, and I'm going to go back to the sound that I actually played with. I put a couple other effects on it. But I started just doing this. So it's a very similar sound. It looks like I did the same thing with the filter, although I used this VCA instead of the other one. It looks like I'm doing some stuff to modulate the pitch. So some pitch instability, which just added a little bit to that distressed sound and gave it a little character. Although it's not, it's like we're modulating, this knob goes over the range of 5 semitones, so that's 10. I'm not going to be able to do math right now, but at the most, this is 5 semitones. So yeah, this is like 8 cents. So it's like modulating it by up to 8 cents. And then we can get into this later, but this is like sort of a stutter delay based effect with some more pitch modulation. This is one of my favorites. And I just was like, just playing stuff. Like this was literally the first thing I ever wrote. So very clearly like just sort of an unstructured improvisation, like just playing stuff, experimenting with some chord movement, but this doesn't have a lot of shape, but it does have an interesting sound. I was like, that sound feels like distressed and it feels expansive and it feels exciting. Like there's definitely something I want to do with that. So it looks like I just kept playing. And for whatever reason, I decided this was F sharp minor. It's like, it's not quite F sharp minor, is it? It's F sharp, it's F sharp Lydian? This is F sharp Lydian. I don't think that's what made it into the track, but it's what I was doing that day. So then for whatever reason, there's this little phrase here. That's certainly kind of out harmonically. I don't know what I was doing there, but the next thing though is literally this like whatever this is a 16 bar phrase. This is Cumulus right here. So between this improvisation and this, I basically wrote the entire like core of the track, because if I play the next section, you basically get Cumulus. So it seemed like and I don't remember this because it was almost 2 years ago when I actually did this sketch. It went from this kind of disorganized, kind of noodle and like F sharp Lydian to like a pretty clear call and response melody in F sharp major, which yeah. It's funny, it's like being a kind of a studio musician, like I play a lot of these melodies like once. So that's the call and response. And I must have just been sort of slowly working that out. And then some of them I played up an octave, some of them I played down an octave, and I was like, well, that sounds interesting. And it looks like I added some things to it. Let's go back though. Like this sound was the sound that we started with. Let's see if we can get it even closer just without even like looking at the other one. So it's longer for sure. And I think it's monophonic, which gives it a totally different character. We need a lot more reverb, for sure. And it needs a longer decay, for sure. The reason why I really like working with the default patch, and it's not because I'm a preset snob, even though I kind of am, but nothing against presets if you use them. I think you have to, and sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm not going to go down that path. I use the sounds that work for you. But I think for me, it's like, what I like about starting from this patch and making something new every time is it always comes out a little different. And to me, it's like, it's just part of the whole process. I think my mic's kind of loud. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. So, and then I think I wanted to add some pitch and stability. So I think what I did is I took the LFO, something like this, and then just took it back into the VCO, and then like added like this to it. And then I took off reset so that the LFO is free running, and I probably made it run a lot slower. So like, that's pretty close. It's actually even pitchier than the real one. Oh, that's we can even, what I like about this is there's attenuators on everything. We can just turn the level of the LFO down. That one's up an octave. Pretty close. Let's listen. This one feels more majestic, though. It feels... We don't have to try to match them. I'm just taking you through the process. What we are missing is, first of all, some delay. I've been sort of trying to do less reverb and delay lately, but not on this track, apparently. So permutate is one of my favorites. I'm going to actually switch to... Check this out. I did all these switchers in OBS before I started, so I can get fancy with screen views. This is a track. This is an effect I did in permutate. It's one I saved called Gyroscape. It's inspired by a track called Gyroscope by Boards of Canada, and I love just, if you listen to like the way it kind of echoes. This is too fast. You almost get like a second phrase. So let's solo the actual one. You get that right at the tail. So this is really the core of Cumulus. There's like what's interesting about this is actually, it feels swung, but I don't think it is. Oh no, it is. It's swung in the arpeggiator. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it's like 55% swung. So this is just playing the root of the chords. And then we've got, I'm going to talk about this later too, because this was actually derived from the lead sound. It's a very similar patch. And this is where all the power in the track comes from. But I want to play the full version before we get into that. There's that, and that's nothing, and then pretty basic drum track, which I think I changed most of. You know what I think is always interesting to hear is what did I take out? So I've got this, which just sounds like it's... Sometimes I can be like really, really just, I think in some ways like too exacting, and sometimes a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to like the lengths of sounds. Like there's that which is slightly brighter, and there's that which is slightly darker. So they're all just the same track. I'll do that a lot where I'll just duplicate something and I'll be like, what does it sound like if this is darker or brighter? And I'll do it on different tracks, so it's really easy for me to A/B them. I know every DAW has like a tool to be able to A/B stuff, but I don't like them because it's just easier to switch on and off a track. So that's the core of the track. Here's the story of what happened after this. So this was April. This sat in my, like, just in a folder in my computer for 6 months. And occasionally what I'll do is, if I'm just sort of like carving out time to write or just experiment or make something, I will dig up old ideas and just see if they still work. And that's what I did with this. I do also want to talk about like, what was I going for here? I think for me, it's like, it's funny because when I write just for myself as like an artist, I just try to sound like me, which, sometimes it just comes naturally, and sometimes you need to be more strategic about it. Sometimes you need to be like, well, or you need to, I don't know, like this is a very kind of hard thing to explain in terms of being a composer or a musician, where it's like, sometimes you need to let it flow and just receive it and be a conduit. And sometimes you need to really try to control it. And honestly, I don't know what I was doing here, but I do know that these melodies that have these big leaps in them, like, well, that's a fifth. And that kind of figure of like, something that was very kind of typical of the kind of melodies I write. Like I love like euphoric, soaring melodies. There's just something about them that I just gravitate towards. So I think I just did that day. And then this just sat on a shelf, so to speak. And then I dug it back up and I played this and I was like, you know what? That kind of works. Like I should develop this. And that ends up happening a lot, where it's like, for me, it's sometimes really hard to be in the moment. Like, oh, I started this like yesterday and I should finish it today. For me, it was like, well, I started this 6 months ago and I should finish it today. It has to have that time to kind of marinate. Not everything does, but this one did. Let's skip ahead a little bit. So actually, we could skip ahead a little bit, or we could skip ahead a lot. I kind of want to go to, so I do this the same way on every project, whether it's a personal project, whether it's a composing project or a client project or whatever. I don't know why I said version 1, because there's no version 2 of this song. Version 2 would be throw it away and write something else. But the letters are different revisions. So it looks like I got to version E, version 1E, or version E, which was actually version 1A. Let's look at version 1A just for the hell of it. That was, so like with no version behind it, that's the sketch. So the sketch was the original, and then the actual like first iteration was this. And this is where I started sort of editing myself and giving myself direction. So you can probably, if you heard it, you can probably tell it's a lot shorter. And I think this is where it's like, I think at least one person in the chat right now has taken my class. So you have to learn how to edit yourself at the same time you're making something, which is hard. So I think I heard this and I was like, well, having it be short makes it like groovier. It's not, the sounds they're not gelling yet, but it was like, well, it makes it kind of like groovier and it gives it more rhythmic sensibilities, but the sound is so much shorter that it just loses, it like doesn't have that soaring quality. So I'm sure the feedback I gave myself was, well, you didn't make it any better. Like you just made it different, and you just made it sort of, it didn't have that soaring character that I was going for. So let's see what I did in version B. We're not going to listen to all of these, but I'm kind of curious now. Like, what did I do here? Looks like I went back, and this looks pretty developed. So this looks like, oh, okay, I figured out like how to actually like extend this and where I wanted the drops to be. And so, as long as we're doing that, let's go ahead and let's listen to version 1E. This was the version that I ultimately ended up sending out to Mousetrap as a demo. Let's listen to like the first statement up to the like around the first drop, and then we'll kind of break that part down. Because I worked on it, like a lot of the iteration that happened between version 1, I guess version 1B and version 1E, which is B, C, D, E, which is only like 4 revisions, felt like it was a good balance in terms of just like, let's improve this as much as we can, and let's also just get it done. Because it's like life is busy, and I think I was like, well, I have a couple days. It was probably right around, it was in December. I know it was in December. It was December of 2024 that I finished this. And I was like, well, I've got a little time. Let's like see what comes of this and see how good we can make it in that amount of time. And it took 4 revisions, and I felt like, all right, this is a great balance of like, this is how good I think this can be. So let's listen to it. So, full disclosure, I'm not sure if the release used my mix or used the stems, but I was really happy with this mix. There's something, honestly, about it that just worked. The other thing I should say about it, and I meant to say this a lot earlier, and I realize that I'm talking a lot, and I think that, and I'll start showing some stuff in a minute, a little more, hopefully, if that's what you're here for. But I called this Cumulus from the first sketch. And I think it helped a lot. It really helped direct the energy. It felt like an evocative name. It felt like it represented what this track was about. I mean, clouds are condensation, and I'm a heart on my sleeve guy. Like, a lot of my music and expression is really emotional, and I felt like the sort of collection of emotion and condensing, and then the condensation that happens after of clouds really sort of telegraphed that well. and felt like it was in line with the expression. I felt like giving this track a name that I really believed in really early really helped. And I honestly think, again, like I said this on Instagram, I can't speak for the label, but I actually think it helped. It just helped identify the spirit of this thing, and it made it work. Names are really, really powerful, and language is really powerful, even though this track has no words at all. I feel like it says a lot of what I wanted it to say. So anyway, let's get into sort of the like the heart of this thing, I guess, which is there's not a whole hell of a lot in this track. It's not that many tracks. I mean, it says that there's 35 here, but a lot of those are like MIDI tracks that I recorded the audio of. What I'll do for a last pass a lot of times is I'll take any hardware synths, I'll render them to audio so that, if I open this in 10 years and I sold something, which I inevitably will because I never hold on to gear for that long, I feel like, although I'm trying to, be a little bit better about that lately, but it's like, who am I kidding? It's fun sometimes to just try stuff and swap stuff out. I'm trying to be a little better about it, but anyway, sorry, I already said that. It's just nice to have it like rendered as audio, and then I can render it offline. So we've got our lead. And then looks like I did a little bit of support with the lead. So we've got a pad from a hardware synth. So that together sounds like this. And then we're going to add this to that. So that's like sort of a lower mid. Looks like we have like 4 different drum kits. This one is kind of the main one, playing claps with really kind of too much reverb in my opinion if I listen to it now, but maybe I rolled that off. The whole kit cannot have that much reverb on it. No, it looks like it went away. So, okay, good. This one, this is just, a lot of times I'll just put like a snare roll on its own track. It's really simple. Like this track really is about keeping things as simple as possible and just having as little as possible in the track that works. It's really like, and I've heard other producers say this, which is like the sweet spot is when you can't take anything else out. And I think it really is true. So we've got our lead, we've got chords supporting that lead. We've got these kind of low stabs that give it a little bit of foundation and weight. We've got some percussion that creates some space. I'll get into what that is in a second. Like it gives it, a sense of groove, and it gives it some space. And then we've got our hats and shaker that give it really kind of a forward sense of propulsion. All the kit, and the kit's all from Atlas, which for me has been just like a really indispensable tool just in terms of speed. I think it's like all those memes where you're looking, all the memes of like, I'm looking for a snare. I know some of that is just like supposed to be funny, and it is, because we all do that. But what I like about Atlas is it's all laid out like this, and it's really easy to find stuff. And then you can just throw it into the pads, and then you can create a groove using the grid, and then you can drag the grid right to the MIDI arrange window. So it's like the whole drum workflow can be honestly like a real pain in the ass. But I feel like being able to search for samples quickly, being able to sequence them, and then put them right into the arrange window and get out of the sequencer, it has been like really great. So there's a couple other things. So looks like I added some reverb, some long like reverb and delay to the lead in this transition section. So it kind of gets verbed out there, and then there's this kind of counter melody. very kind of reminiscent of like early 2000s, late 90s progressive house, which is a little bit of the vibe that I was going for. Like, I feel like electronic music for me, the reason why I gravitate toward it as a genre is because I feel like it does like tension and release and euphoria better than any other genre. Like, and to me those emotions and that's like one of the things I look to music to conjure. And I think these kinds of sounds just do them particularly well. And for me, that era was such a great era. I just wanted to do something that gave a little bit of a nod to it without sounding like pastiche or anything. So let's listen to this. Like, let's listen to what happens kind of in this build up before the first drop. So, and you know what? I'm gonna switch to this. I know it makes everything a little smaller, but I want to open some things here. Like, I want to open this up, and I want to open just the limiter up so you can see a little bit more of what's going on. So I love drops that like everything comes in at once and they introduce new material. Like, there's so many different ways to do a drop. You can do a drop where it's like the drop actually feels like a release, but I wanted this one to feel like an elevation. So sometimes it's like you can build tension, 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 and then the drop comes and it feels like you're taking a breath. But for this, I wanted it to feel like you sort of ascended to the next state or rung or whatever metaphor we want to use. I'm really, really happy. I think for me, I kind of got lucky in some ways. The key and the sort of just the way that everything works together in this section of the track just hits really pretty much perfectly. And it's and there's not and some of it is because there's not a whole hell of a lot happening. So there's our lead. There's these stabs, which I think are crucial for the groove. And they're a derivative of the lead. There's that bass, which I don't know, from the initial sketch, it's like just a sort of a pulse, like a swung pulse bass. It's actually aside from the drums, it's the only swung thing in the track. There's a sub, which is pretty low. Unless you have like headphones on, you probably can't hear it. And then there's the kit. And there's two components to the kit. One is kind of the main groove, and the other is our 16th note hats with the shaker. So let's listen to the main groove and see what I put on it. Let's take everything off. So with everything off, it sounds like this. I really like the deflector. It's a distressor, I think unofficially, but it's basically a distressor emulation with with a few features. I actually don't know the distressor super well, but this has like some built-in side chaining, so it'll ignore everything. This ignores everything under 60 hertz. You can have it ignore everything under 250 too. Not a huge difference. I mean, it's hard to hear because I have one ear on and one ear off, so I can hear myself talking. I love this plugin. For me, this is absolutely indispensable for making bass sound larger than life. I don't know what it does that other plugins don't, but it is insane how much bigger it can make your bass. So this is without it, and this is with it. Without, with, kind of subtle in headphones, but it makes a big difference. Like in the car, you don't want, I'm of the mindset that you don't want really long, huge bass drums. You want punchy, short transients. I think that whole thing about kicks having a pitch is kind of bullshit, because most kicks aren't one pitch. They're a descending pitch controlled by an envelope that goes boom much more quickly and much lower. So they don't really have a fundamental where they settle. If we listen to this one, it does have a little bit of a A little bit of a descending pitch. If I take off all, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here. If I take off, I made it a lot shorter. If I take that off, it does ring out a little bit. Let's hear what it sounds like with that. And guess what? It doesn't punch as hard because, let's undo that. Can I undo that? Yeah, where's undo? Oh, there it is. Come on. Yeah. So a shorter kick makes it punch harder because it's not competing as much with everything around it. So let's put other stuff on. So interestingly, I don't know why I did. Oh, you know what? I did this so that I can, I'm sure I'm scooping the, yeah, I scooped the low end out during the transitions. There it is. Yeah. So the kick is just like a poke there. And then this is just a transient, like enhancer, spiff, kind of an expander. Here it is without it. This one makes it, wow, it makes a huge difference. I really pushed this thing. I didn't realize how much I had. And then fresh air. This is free from Slate. I'm probably not using the right. I should use the bypass on the plugin, not from Logic. Just gives it a little bit more sizzle and a little more definition, which of course is the idea of like adding air to a track. Sometimes it's easy to go too much with that. But just listening to this section, if you take out these stabs, need them because without them it just doesn't have any groove. Like, and part of the reason why it gives them groove is because they're not playing a traditional phrase. They're playing like they're doing a 2 against 3 kind of thing where it's like dun 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 dun. So and we could go brighter. One thing I also like about Ace is it's really easy to change the filter types to the number of poles in the filter. So more poles makes the filter roll off more sharply, and fewer poles make it roll off more gradually. So fewer poles means you have a brighter filter. So this is using a 3-pole filter, whereas the lead uses a 4-pole filter. And really, it's like, I like to say this a lot, it's splitting hairs, but splitting hairs is part of our job. I feel like it's the right balance. Because if we go to a 4-pole with that sound, it's too dark. If we go to a 2-pole, that's actually not bad. But the 3-pole was the sweet spot. Anything blue here is a synth that I just recorded. Sometimes I like to go back and I like to be like, well, why did I take this out? This thing called Sparkle. Like, what is that? Well, that's kind of cool. It reminds me of this track called Remind by Orbital, which is probably kind of what I was going for. And I may have taken it out because I felt like it was either too derivative or just unnecessary or both. Let's hear what it adds. All right, I know why I took it out. I took it out because it competes for space with the lead. And the whole point of this track, the whole point of the phrasing and why it works the way it does is the lead makes a statement, it resonates, it like dissipates, and it kind of evaporates. And if you're putting stuff in that space, you're not letting the lead do that. And that's why I think I eventually took it out. Looks like I do have it here. Which makes sense to kind of blur it out in the space right before the drop. I use this plugin a lot. This is why I have it up here. I really like it. Transit. Didn't come out that long ago. I have Transit 2 also, and for whatever reason I go back to this one. I think I like Transit 1 better. It's just easier to work with for some reason. And it just lets you stack on a bunch of transitional effects all at once. And so it does some like phasing, and it has like an oscillator riser, and it has some noise. For whatever reason, it doesn't play the riser like when the track's not playing, which I don't understand. Like, yeah, you can kind of hear it. That sounds weird though. And I love to do that where it's like, all right, we've got our riser. That's the automation for it. It rises, 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 rises. And then at our fourth beat, it cuts sharply. We've got only our clap, 2, 3. And then we just have that space, that ring out, and then we get punched here. So that goes all the way to our first big break. And then the break is similar with a few additions. One is this these stabs from a hardware synth I had, and those kind of develop. Just to make the second drop feel a little bit more developed than the first, and then, or the second build. And then the second drop has a few more other elements in it. Most notably these two. So it's got this. It's got another lead that doubles the main lead. And it's got another stab layer that kind of provides a counter melody to go along with these. And really, I think these are kind of this like higher mid-range is kind of the driving force of this track. I don't think it has the momentum without them. Without them. And then this counter melody kind of develops. So this provides a little bit of a thread through the second drop that's not just like a repeat of everything that's going on. I wanted to have one thing in there that did that, but really so much of this was just an exercise in taking stuff out and making sure everything in there was really true to the spirit of what I was trying to do. Which I think is like the hardest part, honestly, of writing any music. It's like using all this stuff, learning the tools, like that's like you have to do that. It's like table stakes. Like you have to make stuff sound good. But like knowing what you want to say and then being strategic in a way that like I'm really strategic in like my composition work because you have to be. It's like, does this serve the thing that I'm writing it for is like always the question. You have to be strategic in your own work too, even when you're just making stuff for you, like as an artist, but it's a different kind of strategy. It's like, you have to keep yourself in check, but you also like can't kill your own vibe, and it's hard. Which is why I think this practice of like starting with a sketch and letting it simmer and then coming back to it and thinking like, really critically being like, is this something I actually really want to develop, or should I just like start something new? For me, I've done this enough to know it's like the things that really are meant to be finished, I will find the time and the energy to finish. And the things that are meant to, maybe aren't the most pure expressions of these things, of what I want to say. Maybe just were like good exercises. It's kind of how I think about it, I guess. It's tough because it's like you need to approach it strategically. You need to think about your art and what you're doing the same way you do about your like you need to think about it like a business. I guess I'm sort of dancing around that, but it's really true. But it's like, for me, the essential question has always been like, how do I treat this differently than I treat my work for hire projects? And the answer is that the truth is they're not that different. It's that you have to sort of be able to give yourself guidance without getting in your own way. Because in these, and sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, like, there's no client. You are your client. The piece doesn't have a brief. It's not meant to accompany anything else. It is the thing. It's a big part of why that's why I just used my name for these, because I feel like, ironically, all the projects I've written for are less me than the stuff I write for myself. Even though it's like, it's the convention to, if you're a composer, you use your name. I felt like this stuff really reflected like me and why I came to music to begin with. But that I feel like I'm starting to get sentimental, and I don't need to I need to go too far down that road. But there's a couple people in the stream. I was gonna probably call it there, like, ish, but if you have any questions, jump in. If there's anything specific you want me to show, otherwise, we can call it there, and I can do another one of these. I could do a more general one about like synth sounds. There's another one I think would be fun to do, is like just jumping in and trying to write something from scratch. It's a little hard because I think this stream sometimes introduces a little latency. It makes it hard to hear, but I can get around that. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. How it sounds without any melody? Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the melody is the core of what this is. But let's mute it and see what happens. Yeah. I think it could kind of work for a short section like that, particularly like if there were an extended version. I mean, it was kind of a classic. This track's already 6 minutes, but for this era that I'm kind of inspired by for this track, like, it was not unheard of to have tracks last for 10 minutes, and I could totally see something like that happen for a stretch. If there were a 10-minute version, I think it would work. I think it would, after a while, it would feel like maybe it would lack focus. I've never been one for, like, I don't think everything has to have a melody, but I do think having a melody and having something to focus on makes things sound a little more, I'm searching for the right word, but I think timeless, I think, is the word I'm searching for. I realize that sounds really biased, because I'm not even like I never consider myself like a melody forward composer or artist. I guess maybe a better word for this is, it's not really a melody. It's like a focal point. It's like the thing. It's like the central thing that makes this track what it is. Without it, it's really just sort of like some cool sounds and a groove. The melody is what gives it its identity. So yeah. Cool. Well, hopefully that was helpful and made some sense. I realized that we bounced around and covered a bunch of different stuff. Any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to call it, and I'll try to do these like regularly ish. It's fun. And like I said, I think maybe just doing one that's purely like, let's just start making something. And then even, if more people join, I could sort of take it where people want to see it go, and I could explain some of the choices. Cool. Yeah, I'm glad it was fun to bounce around. Thanks for joining. More soon, hopefully. I'll keep like Instagram stories usually is, I think it's the best way to share this stuff, because it can be like, oh, this is happening right now, but I'll try to be good at like reminding a couple days out. Cool. Thanks for joining. This was fun.